Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Young Guns. I'm Stephen Perkins, editor-in-chief of OUTSET magazine, and joining me this week, Evan Schrage and Jacob Richards. These are two people who are both, well, Evan, you're studying law. Jacob, you're studying law too, right?
Not yet.
Whoa, I just heard myself. Not yet, you said?
Not yet.
But that's your plan.
Potentially.
It'll change pretty quickly.
So anyways, we are here talking this week 95% about the debate recap. We do just have a real quick thing to mention that I think we talked about 2 weeks ago on this show. Evan was on as well. And that is the 9/11 bill that passed the House, passed the Senate, went to the president to sign. He vetoed it. This is the bill that would allow the families of victims of 9/11 to sue the Saudi Arabian government. And President Obama said no. And so today, the Senate overrode. They said yes again. And so now that is a law. And now countries can sue each other. So, Evan, I know you have strong feelings about this. I'll let you take the first crack at it.
Right. So, well, it was a rare veto override, which we don't see very often. This is actually Obama's first veto override in his 8 years as president. And as we had kind of talked about last time, the victims of, well, anybody really that has a cause of action against, that wants to bring a cause of action against another state for terrorist reasons can, or because they believe the country was state sponsors of terrorism, can bring a cause of action in district court. It passed overwhelmingly in the Senate. I think Harry Reid was the only one to vote against it. So it's rare that I agree with Harry Reid on something. And then it passed overwhelmingly in the House as well, because obviously you need 2/3 in both the House and the Senate to override a veto by the president. And we talked about, the ridiculousness kind of the bill last time. It's not really enforceable. Saudi Arabia doesn't have to show up. There's also a provision in there that says the Attorney General can put any pending litigation on hold if the United States is currently in talks with that country about that terrorist issue. So it's a win for political points today, but not much else.
Jacob, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I agree with Evan that it's really only newsworthy because the override is so rare. But it would have been nice to see it happen for something actually impactful. I mean, it's a sign that we're in a slow news cycle today that this is even being talked about. I don't see it having any practical impact one way or the other.
Well, I think it's a sign that Congress is not an agency of government anymore. Their goal is not to govern. Their goal is not to, I don't know, pass a spending bill that doesn't kick the can down a couple more months. Their goal isn't to pass meaningful legislation. It's now to score political points. There's no other way to read it. And I know a lot of conservatives and certainly the families of 9/11 victims will say, this is a great thing. I don't see how this makes any sense. That this is the priority, the week the year, we have all these important things that need to be taken care of. But let's make sure that we can sue Saudi Arabia because we want to feel better about ourselves. And it opens up this world of possibility for other countries to do similar things to us. I know that we like to take this high ground and act as if we're invincible. But I don't see how this is a positive, beneficial thing. But hey, bipartisanship in whatever form we can get it, I guess.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. It's the whole do nothing Congress thing all over again. If this is what they get accomplished, right? I mean, it's great publicity. It's like saying you support the troops, right? It's so vacuous, yet you have to do it. It would sound un-American not to support the victims of terrorism, right? But like Evan said, it's completely unenforceable. It will have no impact whatsoever. We're not safer for it. These families aren't better off. So seems like a waste of time.
I'm all about supporting the victims of 9/11. I'm not about supporting their families' right to sue a government. So I don't know. Label me as you wish for that. Evan, any final thoughts?
Well, in an election where it's literally a toss-up everywhere, it doesn't hurt to have the I helped the 9/11 victim. 9/11 is always a great talking point in an election cycle, and probably will be for the next, 10 years until we're finally out of Iraq and Afghanistan. It'll be a talking point to bring up. And so it's sad that we have to keep using it for political purposes, but it's effective.
Are you saying we'll be out of Iraq and Afghanistan in 10 years?
I hope so.
Is that an official prediction we can make here?
You heard it here, folks.
That'd be great.
I think McCain's prediction of 100 years is probably more accurate there.
God help us. All right, let's talk about the war that I think probably caused more destruction, which was the debate on Monday night between Donald Trump, Hillary Clinton, and sadly, no Gary Johnson or Wi-Fi hater Jill Stein. This was a weird debate on a number of levels. The only reason I enjoyed the debate was because there were tacos and queso and drinks around me. So that kind of made it a little bit better. The numbers from this thing are incredible. So we have 146 million people registered to vote. And of that, 84 million people watched this debate, which I think begs the question, were people watching this debate for serious discussion and debate over policy, in which I kind of chuckle, or was this more of like, we want to see how like dirty Trump and Clinton are going to get with each other? And semi the good news for people like us is that it wasn't too bad. Like, it wasn't too vicious. It was embarrassing on a number of levels, but it wasn't too vicious. But also on the policy side, there really wasn't much of it. So let's go ahead and get your thoughts on it. So Jacob, who do you think won this debate, and why did they win? Why did the other person lose?
I think it was fairly close. If you look at most of the analysis coming in the wake of the debate, I think you could probably make the case that Trump won the first third of it. The economic policy questions, I think, went in his favor, not for any substantive policy reasons, but because Clinton is either unwilling or unable to defend free trade. From my perspective anyway, one of Bill Clinton's finest accomplishments was NAFTA, and she's up there completely unwilling to defend it, even though, empirically it was a success. But overall, I think, the second half, you get into Trump being Trump a little bit more the mudslinging. But generally speaking, I think he exceeded expectations more than she did. Clinton's been in the spotlight for long enough that we basically knew what we were going to get, barring any sort of medical incident on stage. I think that we got what we expected from her, and we could have at least conceived of a Trump scenario where he made a fool of himself, and that clearly didn't happen. So I don't know how big of a victory it was, but I would probably give the nod to Trump on Monday night.
Evan, most people said that Clinton was pretty much the clear winner, and it did look like Trump kind of took the advice that he had been getting to stay a little more level-headed for the first 30 minutes or so of the debate. But then something happened. Clinton got under his skin. She pulled him into a trap, and he took the bait, especially when she started talking about his record with taxes, to which Trump weirdly said, I'd be smart if I'm smart because I don't pay federal taxes. And it kind of just went all downhill from there. As you were watching the debate, how did you read those moments?
Well, I don't really disagree. I kind of disagree that it was close at all. I think Clinton blew Trump out of the water in pretty much all respects. Trump has a weakness, and it's when you get him to talk for more than 2 minutes without interrupting him. If you noticed, Hillary didn't say a darn thing when Trump was going off on something. That's because all she has to do is stay quiet, and Trump will make a fool of himself all by himself. You had him admitting that in a question about racial healing in the country and Obama's birth certificate, he said, I think I did a favor for the president by getting him to release his birth certificate, even though he admitted he had been pushing it for 5 years, knowing it was a lie. So Clinton came away tonight with, like, the other night with an army of ads to come out, roll out right around the beginning of November that'll just mush him the rest of the way. Most people will pay attention to the first debate, and then, you know, it'll trickle off for the second and third. Will not see nearly as many people watch the second and third debate, and that's because this is when people actually start to pay attention. And if you notice, Trump's demeanor didn't really change from the primary debates, his debating style, and we know that because he doesn't like to practice and he doesn't like to prepare. And that worked when you had 16 other people and you really didn't have to say that much. You just had to get in your few key points, and that was the end of the night. You just looked like the more presidential person up there on the debate stage, not, I mean, you know, anywhere else. But when it came to going up against Clinton for an hour and a half, he clearly didn't have the stamina intellectually, or it seems like physically, because he kept sniffing so much, to be on the debate stage. So it was kind of an odd paradox that he accused Clinton of having so little stamina.
What's interesting, if you watch, I don't like to watch too much of the post-debate kind of recap and analysis from the networks, like right after it happens, because I think it's important to sleep for a little bit and then come back and look at it, as we've done for now a couple of nights. But it was interesting that Trump was sent out into the spin room, and one of the commentators said, usually you see that when the candidate and their team feels as if they did not do very well. And of course, he comes out and he's not defending his performance other than to say he had a defective microphone, which I thought was just bizarre. And it's one of those things, it's like, oh yeah, I forgot that Trump is the candidate, and that's the only reason a human would say something like that. But also, you know, I kind of took that to mean, well, Trump is also Trump and he likes the media attention. So maybe that wasn't, I think in his mind, he probably does think that he won the debate, or at least, well, I don't know if he'd be willing to admit that he tied with Hillary Clinton, but I think he did, or I think he thinks that he did very well. His campaign did not think that, clearly. Kellyanne Conway was not happy after the debate, but I think that he thought that he did fairly well. Another thing that I thought was so odd about Trump's performance was the fact that he was being fact-checked for the most part by Lester Holt, and he continually just drove over those fact checks by repeating these claims that most people know to be inaccurate, like flat out lies. And there's a whole comment there about how Clinton wasn't fact checked as much because her comments were misleading. But do you have any thoughts on like the fact checking, which I know was a very controversial issue about should a journalist fact check? I thought it was just kind of wild how all of that played out.
Well,
yeah, I don't.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, you go.
Yeah, I don't think that I don't think it's fair to say that the average viewer knows that most of those statements were false. He said plenty of things that were just like easily verifiably false. But in terms of the people that are up for grabs in this election and the people he had to win over, I think that, and getting back to clarify why I believe he probably won in terms of he outperformed expectations more than her, is Donald Trump will still be Donald Trump. He will make false statements, but that's proven effective. And I think that it looked, you know, better than his performance in the primaries in terms of he didn't get into a fight with the moderator. He'd basically just deny it and move on. And no, I didn't say that. That's not true. That's false. Wrong. Whatever his slogan was at the time. And so I think that in the mind of the average television viewer, that ends the question, moves on to the next thing. For example, like the line about China fabricating global warming to hurt our economy, easily verifiable. He tweeted that in 2012, but nobody watching the debate that wasn't already anti-Trump is probably aware of that fact. I have very little confidence in the average voter to go fact check these sorts of things. And so what matters is managing public perception. And I think he did a decent job of presenting himself as more restrained. Granted, he's still Donald Trump. I don't think that traditional criteria apply as far as matters of substance. I think Hillary won, but she was what we expected. I think he was slightly better than what we'd seen in the past.
Well, I mean, I'm of the opinion that moderators should fact check. I just question the extent to which that they can fact check fairly, and by that I mean there's always something that the other person says that's just not true. And even if it's not as big as, oh, well, you said that the Chinese were creating global warming, it might not be as big. There's still things that you need to fact check on. And the problem with fact checking, to some extent, is that it doesn't go far enough. Like with that China example, it's very like Lester Holt should have had a printed out copy of that tweet that said, yes, Mr. Trump, you did. You tweeted it on blank, blank, 2000, whatever. And it's right here. And that's something that you can easily do. You have to be able to do something like that for Clinton. Otherwise, it just makes you look biased. But that's, I mean, to us, that doesn't sound like bias. That just sounds like, good journalism being, gotten all your ducks in a row as opposed to facts. So I question the extent to which that moderators can actually do it fairly. And that's why I'm a little more hesitant on it. But on the whole, I think I'm more of the opinion that they should be fact-checking as much as they can, because we can go and watch a rally when they come to town and they can spew lies and there's no fact-checking involved. But nobody's going to go and the average voter isn't going to go and look up, did Trump tweet about the Chinese creating global warming? They're not going to do that because they don't care that much. They just want the few minutes of information that they need to make up their minds whether they're going to stick with the same party they chose last year, or maybe it's time to go in a different direction. And that's why it's so important. But can they do it effectively? I don't think they can.
Well, and we have this idea that now we live in a post-fact world. And so the role of a moderator, Lester Holt had an extremely hard job. And he's been in the business for 30 years. He's never had a scandal. He's never had really any issues.
A great Republican.
And I think, and he's a registered Republican. But then again, Donald Trump is not, that's a challenging thing. But in terms of fact checking, I think there's really only so much you can do in real time, because as a moderator, you're having to listen to what the candidates say. You're having to prepare for your next question. You can only have so much research. And if they say something, you're not Shepard Smith with people on big screens behind you, just getting all this real-time information. So it is really tough. What I think is effective, and Bloomberg TV tried this out, as a couple of other media organizations did, but Bloomberg did it with the picture of the debate. They did live fact checking on their end. So it wasn't the moderator, but it was the outlet. And then you had a lot of publications and websites and news sources fact checking in real time, or the next day they posted everything. The challenge with that is, with the number of lies or mistruths or misleading statements that were said during the debate, you pull up one of these fact-checking articles, and it's just this long list of all these things, and some of it gets into really nitty-gritty details. And I think you're right for both of you. I don't have faith in the average voter that they're going to go through and read all of that. I didn't even read every single fact check that was done. And I think it just speaks to kind of the media environment we're living in now, where everything is the attention span is short, everything is brief. In this debate, interestingly enough, their answers were quite long, and Trump isn't able to really, he adds a lot of fluff when he has to have a longer answer. So there was just so much information coming at us, and the ability to fact check was so challenging. Because you could say okay, if he says that he was not against the war, we know the facts with that. But if he brings up something else that we weren't prepared for, how are we going to do that in real time? So that was a big challenge, and it's going to continue to be a challenge, not just in this election, but in future elections. And the hope is that real-time fact checking gets more kind of comprehensive, but also easier to do in real time. It's definitely a challenge for journalists.
Right. And I wanted to make sure I got in this last bit, because it's been irking me about that part about when they were talking about stop and frisk, and Hillary Clinton had said it would ruled unconstitutional, and it wasn't fact checked by Lester Holt, right, on the basis. Things like that. Was stop and frisk ruled unconstitutional? Well, the answer is technically yes, in the one instance that they're applying to, but it was a district court in New York, and it didn't get beyond that. The state of Texas, that all the district courts in Texas do not have to listen to that ruling, and they will probably not find it very persuasive unless it has substantially similar, it was a substantially similar instance. Even then, they're not bound by that ruling. No other district court in the United States is bound by that ruling. No, not even the rest of the district courts in that circuit. It was one court, one judge's opinion. It wasn't the Supreme Court. It wasn't an appellate court. So it's not true that it was ruled unconstitutional throughout the land. That's just not true. But can you fact check that kind of information in real time to such that we can actually get all the answers we need to get in? I don't know if you necessarily can, but saying that allowing people to just get away with the half-truths, even still, I don't think is very beneficial for us.
Well, and for someone like Clinton, she's someone who knows that that's the case. You cannot tell me Hillary Clinton really does not know that stop and frisk, was not ruled constitutional nationwide. So she knew that. So a lot of people, her own campaign said the moderator should be fact checking, and I agree but that's also one of those instances where you have the lack of education about how government works, about just, maybe that's more of there's most people who, even if they're taking college classes, they may not, unless they're going into law, they may not know about that stuff. But it's like, it's where the lack of education intersects with kind of the current state of politics and even the current state of journalism, where you run into these challenges. It's things like that it's almost a gray area. Maybe it's like an off-white area, if you will. But it's like you throw your hands up and you're like, nothing matters anymore.
No, doesn't matter. No facts matter.
No facts matter. Jacob, do you have any, before we wrap up, do you have any final thoughts on, well, let me ask you about this, because I'm really curious about seeing people's responses to what Trump said about his taxes. So Hillary posed a bunch of theoretical questions about why he hasn't released his tax returns, which I'm of the opinion, as some people may know, I don't think you should have to release anything, any type of personal data, but I digress. She said, well, maybe he doesn't make as much as he says. Maybe he's not as charitable as he says, or maybe he doesn't pay his taxes. To which Trump interjected, and this is the part that he said he had a faulty microphone, because that makes sense. He interjected and said, that would make me smart. And he did it with these hand motions. That was a weird, that wasn't just me, right? That was weird.
That was a weird exchange, but the whole tax thing has been weird. Although I think, when your greatest qualification for public office is that you're really rich, and there's this claim that you're worth more than $10 billion, but Forbes puts him, I think, at between 2 and 5. There's this public perception you have to keep up that first of all, that you're really rich, and that also that, I'm so charitable, there's not these scandals we've seen. There's the scandal with the $258,000 being used incorrectly or whatever. And so I think with Trump, the bad publicity from saying odd things about his taxes is probably worth it to avoid whatever publicity would come with actually releasing them. I think that his mystique sort of relies on maintaining a little bit of mystery about what exactly is in his tax returns, how much is he worth, how profitable is his business. So I'm not surprised he's willing to bite the bullet and say some odd things on that, even though, there's a clip of him criticizing Romney for not releasing. He's the only candidate since the 1976 election not to do it. So I think that looks bad. It probably doesn't look as bad as whatever it is he's trying to hide. I don't buy that it's just that he doesn't want to because he's being audited. I think that's a convenient excuse.
Yeah, I don't buy the audit thing either. Mainly because it's a fact that you can release past returns if you're being but again, who who cares enough? I mean, I feel like that's one of those issues that there is the argument that average voters care about the tax returns.
It's just
I
another
don't-
lie, though. Like if he's not as rich as he says he is, okay,
Yeah, it's another lie. And
it's another lie. Who cares?
with 5 weeks left in the election,
Yeah.
sure as hell he's not going to make that the very last thing that the media talks about before the election.
Right.
Because it's already tight. And by the way, today Clinton has a small post-debate bump, and I hate talking about the horse race of the polls, but mention that. But yeah, the last weeks, the last month or so of the election, that's not what the subject's going to be about. Like he is not going to release taxes unless WikiLeaks somehow leaks them. So it's as simple as that. Before we wrap up, I want to mention one more thing, because I think I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but
That's always a good intro for a segment, right?
There is the theory that Barron Trump has considerable weight over this election. And Donald Trump did say, many people caught on to this, not just me, that Barron is apparently very good at 10 years old. He's very good at computers. And this was when Donald Trump was conveniently talking about the DNC hacks and the hacks from Russia. And so I think this begs the question, either of you can answer if you wish to entertain this. Is Barron Trump a hacker? And am I right that he has more influence over this election than we think?
I think it's a case of a 70-year-old being enamored with the ability of a digital native to use technology they grew up with. I think it looks just like any grandparent saying, oh, my grandkid is so good with technology. Only in this case, oddly enough, it's his young child with his wife that's decades younger than him. So I don't buy into your conspiracy theory here.
Well, Trump did say that maybe it was some 400-pound man on his bed.
How much does Barron weigh?
So maybe there's another son that's 10 years old that weighs 400 pounds that's sitting on a bed hacking into the DNC. And I thought it was very interesting that Trump, when he took that question in response, he said, well, you don't know if it's Russia. You don't know. It could be somebody else. Like he's trying to defend Russia or something, because
he's good friends. He's good friends with them.
Idea.
Well, I mean, nonetheless, guys, all I'm saying is that it's not a conspiracy until it becomes real. And so keep your eyes and ears open. Well, guys, thanks for joining me on this panel and entertaining some of these wilder ideas. Thank you to everyone watching/listening. I encourage you all to subscribe to Young Guns on iTunes. Subscribe to us on YouTube. Evan, where can they find you on the internet?
I'm on Twitter at Evan Schrage. That's at EvanSchrage.
And your avatar's a Bitmoji. Jacob.
Avatar's a Bitmoji. Taxation's not theft.
I am at Jacob Richards AZ, all spelled out on Twitter. You can follow me there.
And if you're watching this on YouTube, all those links are in the description. Follow OUTSET at OUTSET Network, outsetmagazine.com. That's where you can find not only this podcast, but all of our other podcasts and all of the writing that we put up. It's a wonderful little network. I encourage you to check it out. Thank you all so much for joining me this week. And until next week, take care.
Thanks, Steve.